Session 4, Organization of the Nervous System, Part 1. The nervous system is a collection of neurons and glia cells. It's also made up of organs which are all interconnected. The nervous system controls breathing, it controls your heart rate, it controls both voluntary and involuntary behaviors. In this session, we will look at two parts of the nervous system, and these are the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The topics we will cover are the divisions of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the anatomy and functions of the spinal cord, the anatomy and function of the brain, and then anatomy and functions of the cortex. Topic 1, divisions of the nervous system. In the first session, we talked about the nervous system. Generally, it has been made up of structures, systems, and subsystems, or systems and its substructures. Each of them is made up of neurons. The central nervous system is primarily made up of the brain and spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system is made up of two other divisions, somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system. There are two systems here, sympathetic nervous system and then the parasympathetic. Before I go through, I'll give an analogy. If you go to somebody's house and you are taken unawares by a dog, there are a few things you will do. You'll probably look for a stick to hit the dog if it's attacking you, or you probably turn around and run. Whatever you do, whether you run or you fight, is controlled by the nervous system, and in particular, is controlled by the sympathetic nervous system. It is made up of a network of nerves that prepare our organs for a rigorous activity, or what we refer to as emergency. So when you face the dog, your heart rate increases. There's for a lot of blood to pump into your organs. Your blood pressure also goes up. Your respiration also increases. All these are done to energize you to face the danger, which is the dog which is attacking you. We call this phenomenon the fight or flight response. So all the body does without your control is prepare you to fight. If you can't fight, you have to run. When you run from the danger, you notice that there's a lot of panting. Your heart is beating very, very fast. The parasympathetic nervous system, the other part of the autonomic nervous system, brings your body back to normal levels. It will decrease your heart rate, it will restore your blood pressure, and return all organs to pre-stress levels. So the fight, flight, freeze reaction or response is normally involuntary. It's something that helps us meet danger. We meet danger every day, and without warning, our body or our nervous system helps our body react to it. If you are unable to fight or to flee, you freeze. And that is what we experience when we are caught in a chronic panic situation or we are caught in a chronic stress situation. The freeze part is normally refers to illness and eventual dying. The spinal cord. The spinal cord is part of the CNS. It's a thin fiber that lies in the spinal column, which is found in our backbone. The spinal cord is divided into segments. There are 31 segments. Now, each segment has a pair of neural fibers connecting to it. One fiber exits the front, and one fiber exits the back. We refer to the back fiber as a dorsal fiber, and the front as a ventral fiber. The dorsal fiber carries sensory signals, and the ventral fiber carry motor signals. Sensory signals are signals that are coming from an organ or tissue towards the brain. Motor fiber are ones that carry motor commands. And normally they're coming from the brain towards an organ. So two things I've mentioned here. A sensory fiber is one that carries information from an organ towards the brain. And a motor fiber or a motor neuron is one that carries signals from the brain towards the organ. We refer to this as the Bell-Magendie law, the law or principle that explains how motor and sensory neurons connect to the spinal cord. The spinal cord has gray matter. Normally, gray matter has to do with the cell body and also the nucleus. White matter is mainly fat. And so remember our discussion about myelinated axons. That is what causes, or that is what makes up the white matter. When the spinal cord gets damaged, it means that the body's ability to transmit signals to the central nervous system is restricted. So if there is an injury on the spinal cord, neurons below the point of injury are unable to send signals to the brain. And it's the reason why people become paralyzed when there is a spinal cord injury. It simply means that the injury is at a point where the signals from our limbs are not able to cross. This is a diagram of the spinal cord. The brain. The brain is divided into three major divisions: the hindbrain, the midbrain, and the forebrain. As you can see, the name suggests where they are found. The hindbrain, one structure is the cerebellum. Its main function is to control complex movement. So you can think about dance step, gymnastics is controlled by the cerebellum. The size of the cerebellum increases, especially for animals who move very fast, like a leopard, or perform complex movements, like a monkey. It controls movement, it controls balance, it controls coordination. So when your cerebellum is damaged, you will find it difficult to walk, and you will walk with an unsteady gait. Means you could walk swaying from left to right. Another structure is the reticular formation. We refer to it as the reticular activating system because its main function is to send arousal signals to the forebrain. So when you are awake during the day, your reticular formation is actively sending signals towards your brain. That's why you are awake. If it gets damaged, you either be in coma or be in sleep for a long time. The midbrain. The midbrain lies on top of the hindbrain. This is normally small and not visible clearly because it is crowded by the forebrain. There is the top part we call the roof or the tectum, which receives sensory signals from ears and eyes. The floor or the tegmentum receives motor information. Because it receives signals from the eyes, it means that it's involved in location of objects. It's also involved in location of sound. There is a structure we call the colliculus. There is a superior and inferior colliculus. These are important for sensory information. In particular, the superior colliculus allows us to orient to large moving objects. So for example, if a bus moves in your sight, for you to be able to track that object, signals have to be transferred to your superior colliculus. It means when it is damaged, you will see snapshots of a moving object. There's also another structure in the midbrain called the substantia nigra. The substantia nigra is known for its dopamine receptors. It helps with movement. And when it gets damaged, people walk with an unsteady gait. And it is a structure that is damaged in people who have Parkinson's disease. Subcortical structures are structures that are found beneath the brain. So we don't see them. The cortex is the one we see, the white stuff we see on the brain. There are a few cortical structures that we will have to look at now. The limbic system is a group of structures made up of the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. The hypothalamus is a very small structure which is found in the center of the brain. It performs very important functions like controlling hunger, like controlling thirst, like controlling body temperature, and also including sexual behavior. When it's damaged, a person will die right away. Hippocampus is involved in memory formation. So when our hippocampus is damaged, we are unable to form new memories. Our old memories will stay, but we are unable to form new memories. This is a structure of the limbic system. The amygdala, the third structure in the limbic system, regulates emotion and fear. Research done on monkeys long ago, 1930s, showed that when it is damaged, the animal is unable to show appropriate fear response. So for example, when something very scary is approaching, they are unable to interpret that to be very scary or something that they have to run away from. Basal ganglia is also a collection of structures below the cortex. Three key structures are involved: caudate, putamen, and globus pallidus. Basal ganglia controls voluntary movement. When it is damaged, the person will exhibit Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease involves tremors or shakes, muscular rigidity, slow and jerky movements, and sometimes slurred speech. There's another condition called Tourette syndrome. Tourette syndrome is a neurological disorder in which the person sometimes makes vocal tics, sounds that they cannot control, it just happens. Or they have sudden twitches on their faces. Ventricles. Ventricle, as I said earlier, is a gap or space. It's found in the brain. It contains a clear fluid called the cerebrospinal fluid. Normally, the CSF flows through the ventricles and around the spinal cord. It provides support or cushion so that the brain doesn't bump against the skull. In young children, sometimes the ventricles block. And when it blocks, the fluid piles up or it accumulates. Because the child's brain is still developing, the accumulated fluid sits on the brain and puts pressure on the brain. The brain is therefore unable to grow. What happens is that it pushes the child's soft skull out. So what you will notice in a child who has this condition is that they have an extremely large skull or head. We call this hydrocephalus, meaning water on brain. It is treated very easily when found. The doctor will place what is called a shunt in the child's skull to drain the fluid into their stomach. If it is not treated, it will lead to severe cognitive delays or cognitive deficits. It causes what we call intellectual deficit disorder, which was formerly called mental retardation. The thalamus. The thalamus is also a very small structure which is found in the center of the brain. It receives signals from all parts of the brain. It receives sensory signals. So any signal coming towards the brain will first go through the thalamus, and then it is relayed to the cortex. We therefore call it the relay station. So signals about vision, hearing, touch, temperature, all will first go through thalamus before it gets to where it has to go. The only signal that does not go through the thalamus is signals about smell. These go through the olfactory bulb. Topic 4, the cortex. The cerebral cortex is the outer covering of the brain. It is normally what we all see. It's divided into 4 different parts. We call them lobes. So there's a frontal lobe, there's a parietal lobe, and there is an occipital lobe, and there's a temporal lobe. In the diagram you are seeing, they are marked with different colors, so you can easily differentiate them. At the most posterior region, the back, is the occipital lobe. Its main function is to process visual information. So signals that come from your eyes will go through the thalamus and end up with the occipital lobe. So the primary function of the occipital lobe is to process visual information. Other areas in the brain will also process vision. We call those secondary processing or secondary visual processing. The second lobe is a temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is located on the side of the head. The temporal lobe processes primarily signals about sound or spoken language. There's an area called the area A1. So when signals come through the ears to the thalamus, they end up in the area A1. Area A1, found on both sides of the head, allows us to process what we've heard or sound. It also will process movement and sometimes emotional behavior. Frontal lobe. It is the largest portion of the forebrain. Now, and normally, it is what makes human beings different from other animals. The forebrain, unlike other parts of the brain, receives signals from all parts of the brain. So signals from the occipital lobe, signals from temporal lobe, signals from the parietal lobe, all end up in the frontal lobe as well. It also processes signals about motor. So voluntary movement is controlled from the frontal lobes. There is an area called the prefrontal cortex. This is the most anterior portion of the frontal lobe. Anterior means front. So the extreme tip of the frontal lobe, we call the prefrontal cortex. It is responsible for processing very complex behaviors like abstract thinking and planning. It's responsible for working memory. It's also responsible for inhibitive responses. So if, for example, you feel like hitting somebody, but you're able to stop yourself, it's because you have a healthy, functioning prefrontal cortex. Together, working memory, planning, and inhibition, all together we call them executive function. We have come to the end of the first part of the discussion on the brain, on the nervous system. I'll encourage you to read the accompanying chapters.